Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 8.8 patch notes. So if you want to access this Google Doc, you can find that in the description, and I'll also have some timestamps down there to help you jump around and navigate to your favorite parts if you don't have time to watch the whole thing. I do patch notes for every patch. I also do in-depth tier lists. Let's go ahead and pull up the channel, just in case you're new to the channel. I just thought of this. New to the channel, we have a lot of resources, patch notes for every patch, tier lists, every patch, especially really in-depth tier lists for the support role. Also offer my top 5 picks for each role. We have tons of coaching sessions here. You can get a coaching session yourself for just $20 if you're interested in that. Or if you don't have $20 laying around, you can definitely watch a bunch of coaching sessions from other people. I've done a ton of them. Got 105 on the channel. Have in-depth champion guides. I just did a Sona one, Tom Kinch, fairly recently, and I'm going to be adding on a bunch more soon. So just tons and tons of resources for people wanting to learn how to get better at the game. So be sure to check out the main page for all of that. I also stream every night, Monday to Friday, starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We usually go for about 4 or 5 hours. And realistically, I stream a lot on the weekends too. So just a ton of content on the channel. But let's go ahead and get in here. Okay, so LeBlanc be super strong on this patch. I think she's going to be a top 5 mid laner. If you're newer to the game and you haven't played when LeBlanc was really oppressive before the last time they reworked her, you are not going to like to see these changes. LeBlanc, by the nature of her kit, is really difficult to deal with because she has a way to close the gap to get in to kill people, and then she can also escape via, the same thing with her W. And so that means she can get in and out really quickly to blow people up and escape. So she's kind of like Zed, but she doesn't have to wait 60 seconds for her ult. Her ult's actually on a much lower cooldown. And I would argue she does more damage off of less items than Zed does. She's also magic damage, which is a bit more difficult to itemize against for a lot of tanks, because most tanks want to get armor so they can take tower shots. They're going to be resistant against AD carries, and there's just a lot of dangerous AD threats running around right now. If you think of champions like Camille and Fiora that are very popular, you think of things like Kha'Zix in the jungle that's really popular. And armor is just a much easier and more efficient defensive item to get. So that makes AP assassins like LeBlanc even stronger. They also just nerfed Locket on the last patch, so LeBlanc's going to be even stronger because the supports aren't going to be able to get Locket as much. So LeBlanc is very, very well positioned right now to do a ton of damage. And her numbers are just through the roof if you look at some of this stuff. So the total damage that she does on her Sigil of Malice, if she maxes that out, is 310 base damage with a 0.8 ratio on a point-click ability. It's not even a skill shot. You just throw it at him. Which is pretty ridiculous. And then her distortion, they gave that back a ton of damage now. I mean, if we just look at the comparison to how this changed, her Q got a lot more damage on it. It already did a decent amount of damage before, but now it's got even more. And her distortion just got an obscene amount of extra damage. You get 45 extra damage level 1, 145 extra damage at rank 5. What? So now, I mean, I'm not sure what people are going to max. LeBlanc is a very intricate and difficult champion to play, so you're not just going to see her like running wild in every game, and she's going to be a lot more effective at higher elos. But for people who are very familiar with her, that have played her for a long time, she's going to be extremely strong right now. So this is going to be her new Wave Clear's W. I suspect this is probably what people are going to start maxing. Now, they did lower the speed a little bit on this. I haven't seen how this actually works, but they lowered the speed a bit. The cooldown is lower also earlier on, so that's going to be good. And then now, I'm not sure how much of a difference this is going to be. So when you cast, it was 0.85 seconds before you could blink back to where you were, but now it's 0.2 seconds after you finish the dash, so I'm not sure how much faster that is, but it's a lot of extra damage, I can tell you that. So that's kind of a gross amount of damage right there. That also has a 0.6, and her Ethereal Chains is 300 damage with a 1.0 AP ratio. If that gets maxed out, now it does cost a little bit more mana than it did before, but with her itemization, I think she's going to start rushing Ludens now instead of Gunblade. The reason why she would rush Gunblade before is the Q counted as a single target spell, even with her old passive where it would spread to, or her old Q interaction or whatever, where it would spread to other targets, and that was her wave clear, was her Q. Because it was designed to be single target and then spread, then that means whenever she cleared the whole wave, she got the full 15% spell vamp off of that. So that would help her heal and sustain, and it made it very difficult to lane against her. Well, now you're not going to get the same kind of spell vamp interactions with W, because W is coded as an area of effectability, which means you're only going to get 5% vamp instead of 15% vamp. So you're not as incentivized to go Gunblade. It does give you a little bit of extra burst damage, which is nice. You might still see some people getting Gunblade, but Ludens also gives you some nice burst damage. Ludens gives you more mana so that you can spam these abilities, and that kind of offsets the extra mana cost here, going from 40 to 70. It'll offset that. And then her Qs cost a little bit more mana as well. Quite a bit more mana, actually, at level 5. So you really want that extra 500 mana, but that's okay, because Ludens does extra damage. It has respectable AP on it. And it has the 20% CDR, which is really nice. You're going to be able to do your rotation a lot more. So Gunblade has the AD on it, which she really doesn't utilize that much. Like, yeah, she puts in a couple of auto attacks every now and then, but she's not going to miss it that much. Really, she just got that because of the really good healing interaction off of the Q. So it's no problem to go like Ludens, Proto Belt, or something on her and still have a lot of burst damage in her combo. It does free you up if you go Ludens to get the Proto Belt, because if you get Gunblade, you also can't get Proto Belt because you can only have one Hextech item. So Proto Belt, when you jump into their face with the W, then you're going to be able to hit them with all of those bolts that do a lot of extra damage. So I think that's what we'll see. Let's just see what people are getting here. That's sort of my prediction. Just looking at how that changed. Yeah, it's pretty much what a lot of people are doing. You're still seeing the Ludens. You're seeing a Gunblade every now and then pop up, but a lot of people are rotating towards that Ludens. You're seeing a couple of Proto Belts in there. Spellbinders would kind of make sense. You don't need the speed as much, but having the extra burst, since you have really good AP ratios and you're looking to just all in and kill somebody within those 4 seconds when you get that extra ability power, that's pretty nice. So it'll be Ludens plus something. You are seeing some Morellos. That's probably against healing champs. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of that item. The penetration is nice. But it'll be Ludens plus something. Maybe even Deathcap. She has such high AP ratios, you could, in theory, just rush Deathcap on her as well. And then the extra AP off of Deathcap would give her extra burst on the Ludens as well. So I'm not sure of the ideal build. I think it's going to be Ludens first, and then after that, people are probably going to... It might be situational, but... Yeah, it'll probably be like Proto Belt, Deathcap, maybe Spellbinder in some circumstances. I think that's what we're going to be seeing. So yeah, just an obscene amount of damage. Look at some of these numbers. What? I mean, each one of these, her mimicked ability, each one of these are like over 400 damage. With a 0.8 ratio. Total damage, 630 with a 1.2. After you trigger the mark also. I mean, so I think she's going to be extremely oppressive. I think you will see her. She'll be back into the pro scene. I think you'll see a lot of challengers abusing her, just like they were before she got nerfed. Like, she was so oppressive. If you don't remember last year, she was permabanned for like the first 4 months of the year until they reworked her, and they tried to nerf her several times and it didn't matter. So what they're trying to do here is they're like, okay, we're going to give her back all of her old stuff, but we're going to make it cost more mana, so she can't do it a lot. The problem is she's not a spam champion. When she goes in, she's going in to kill you. So it's not like someone who has to constantly just spam things to be effective, like a Cassiopeia or something like that. Like, she's going to kill you really quickly, like in under 2 seconds when she goes in. And so it's not going to matter that it costs a little bit more. And Ludens is so nice right now because it's a 500, mana item now that also gives ability power, cooldown reduction, 20% cooldown reduction and extra burst, so that's fine to get a little bit of extra mana on her. And then Electrocute is disgusting on her as well. So yeah, I think she's going to be really, really strong. I think she's going to be oppressive. Now, your everyday Joe, in Silver 3 is probably not going to be able to abuse her if they play her for the first time in ranked, so be aware of that. But for people who are familiar with her, especially at Plat Plus, this champion's going to be really strong and potentially worthy of a ban. She's kind of like Fizz, in the sense that there's just not a lot of counterplay to her. She's just really, really abusive. And she probably will be off of just maybe 1.5 items. And it's similar to Fizz, where Fizz can go in and usually he can get out after he kills somebody as well. And it's just like, boom, one shot. LeBlanc can do that possibly even better. And she's ranged in lane, which means she's not going to take the same kind of abuse that someone like Fizz is going to take in lane. So I think she's going to be super, super strong. Probably a top 5. Let me see. What's kind of lurking up near the top right now? I think Fizz is still up there. Swain's still really good. Anivia's really good. Echo's really good. Talia's really good. As far as like solo queue, of course, like Ryze and Azir will still probably be playable. We'll talk about them later. And like really top end play, like pro and challenger level play, but those really aren't going to be that great at lower ranks. So we're looking at like what, Echo, Swain, Fizz. I still think Karthus is really good, Anivia. But yeah, I mean, I think LeBlanc will fit in there. I think she'll be right up there with probably like Fizz and Swain as like most oppressive mid laners, most likely. It was like, what kind of counters her would be something like a Malzahar, something with really hard CC that can get her so she can't jump out, so she can't escape. But Malzahar is on the weak side right now. He's been nerfed multiple times. Nobody's playing Malzahar. And he's really one of the only hard counters to her. Someone like Echo might be able to hang on because he can ult to cancel out her damage, but her ult cooldown is going to be shorter, or at least about the same length as his ult cooldown, so it's not going to be that great for counteracting. Someone like Annie, if Annie gets kind of fed and can catch him out, she can kill him. Fiddlestick's good against him in mid lane, but Fiddlesticks is such a rare pick. It's going to have to be something with really hard CC. Twisted Fate might be alright if you can gold card her, but I think she's going to kill you before you can get that off. Ryze, like a top end Ryze player can rune snare her with his W and maybe hang with her, or like a Cassiopeia who can ult her really quickly. There are a couple of options, like an Anivia that can stun her when she goes in, but I think she's going to have a very high priority, and I think she's going to be super strong, so I think she's the biggest story of this patch. It's really good, and she's probably going to become the top assassin mid lane, and so this is going to put a high premium on supports also that can have hard CC, so someone like Lulu's going to gain a bit of ground off of this. Champions like Janna and Nami are going to fall down a little bit because they can't really deal with her. Morgana, like if you can get a bind on her with Morgana, that can be really good. The Black Shield helps a little bit, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough out there. So LeBlanc really, really strong this patch. Like really good. Top 5, probably going to be worth a ban most of the time. I could be wrong, maybe the mana costs are a little excessive, but that's the one thing that they're trying to gate her with to limit her. But I think that's canceled out by Ludens. And I think these people are probably going to be going something like Mana Flow ban, which will also help negate some of that. Let's see Shifter. Shifter's been a very good LeBlanc player for years. He's a top-end player. Oh, I forgot you can use Sudden Impact, too, for an additional, 10 spell pin. It's pretty gross. So Electrocute plus Sudden Impact. This is what Fizz abuses. Really strong. Ulti Hat is interesting, because you do ulti a lot. Okay. I thought she might use Mana Flow, but maybe not. Maybe she doesn't need it. I mean, with blue buff plus Ludens, you should be okay. Okay, so let's move on. Let's look at Ahri. So yeah, LeBlanc, Grand Slam. If you have experience with LeBlanc, definitely dust her off. If you don't know LeBlanc very well and you want to try to learn her, this might be okay, but I suspect she's going to get banned a lot, and she's probably going to end up getting nerfed within 3 or 4 patches. So if you're not good with her, it's probably not worth investing the time. She's just the type of champion, when she is good, she draws a lot of attention, she draws a lot of bans, and she draws a lot of nerfs because pros will pick her up. So that's why I don't recommend her typically as a good one trick, because she has too much spotlight on her when she's good. Now there are just certain champions like that, like Ryze, Azir. A lot of these champions, when they're too good, pros abuse them too much, and they just get the spotlight put on them. For better or worse, depending on how you feel about that. I think it's fine. But she is very good right now. Okay, Ahri, decent changes. I just think her numbers are a bit too low. So basically, like, the biggest change here is if you land your charm, it does 20% more damage, which is something they used to have, that they're dusting that off again. But they also made it to where her Foxfire is much more reliable. So it's 725 range. And if you auto-attack somebody, you're going to land all of the Foxfire orbs on them. So that's pretty nice, because before the Foxfire orbs would just go random places and just hit random things. But now it's much more reliable. You hit your charm, you get 20% extra damage, which is good. You get a little bit less reliable sustain in lane. You get a little bit less movement speed in lane. Reliable movement speed. You can still get it, but it's a little bit harder. You have to land 2 abilities. 2 ability hits. So if you hit somebody with the first part of your Q and the second part, you will gain the 20% movement speed. But the numbers are still kind of on the low side. Now, yes, half of this is true damage. The 140 of it is true damage. So that's basically double damage. So I don't know. I guess that's around like the equivalency of 400 damage with like a 1.0 ratio. So that is pretty good. It does cost a lot of mana, but once again, something like a Luden's can do a lot for her. People were getting Gunblade for a little bit on her, but I feel like Luden's is probably the way to go. Yeah, there's still a couple of Gunblade users, but I think her Q costs enough mana to where you need a mana item early. I think Luden's is probably your best bet there. But so, you know, the damage on that is okay. Additional damage, so total damage, you know, it's only 224 total damage on her W, which compared to some of those LeBlanc numbers, if you'll remember, is not that great. It's okay, you can harass with it a little bit. 700 is a bit close. Her charm really doesn't do much at all, but it does give you that 20% extra damage bonus, which is nice. So if you land that, and then you're able to land that full duration Q on people to get, you know, up to like the equivalency of like 500 damage or so. That's really nice. And then maximum single target damage is only 360 with a 1.0 ratio, which is okay. You should hit most of these Spirit Bolts. So, you know, it's okay. It's like, you know, up to 360 damage at level 1. It's only 180 damage after you do all 3 jumps on somebody. By comparison, if you look at, like, Tristana, her point-click ability on her ult, that's on basically the same cooldown, does 300 damage at level 1, right? So this is a mage who's supposed to be an assassin that only does 180 damage? Oh, okay. Gotcha. Sorry, I was misinterpreting that. That is per jump. Okay, it said maximum single target damage, but that is if you hit somebody with all 3 bolts per jump, and you get 3 jumps. Okay, this is much better then. Okay, so that maximum damage done. Fires up to 3 bolts that each pursue her nearest enemies dealing. Wait. Each enemy can only be hit by 1 bolt. Okay, no. I retract that. Same deal. So you can hit up to 3 enemies in a team fight by spreading those bolts, but you can only hit 1 person per bolt. So okay, so my what I said stands for an assassin. It's only a maximum of 180 at level 6 and 360. When you have like an 80 carry that can just point click kill somebody, I mean there's so many champions where their ultimate does more than 180 at level 1. So that's really weak. So in a team fight, yeah, this is a good number. You can hit a bunch of multiple targets and things like that. But she's really best at picking people off. So the bottom line is she's okay. I don't think this fixes a lot of her issues. She just isn't. she's kind of a safe pick. You know, she can roam, she has mobility, she has a little bit of damage, she has a little bit of CC, but it's just like, it's not quite enough damage, it's not quite enough mobility in order to rotate to the side lanes fast enough. I think she'll be mediocre. I mean, she's okay, but I just feel like there are going to be better options. You know, LeBlanc, Fizz, Echo, a lot of these top-end assassins are going to be much more effective than she's going to be most of the time. So she's okay. If you like her, you can pick her. This definitely helps her, but I think she's going to be outclassed. Compare that to something like LeBlanc that was dealing like, 400 damage with like a 0.8 ratio on her abilities. She's okay. I don't expect her to make a huge splash. People will try her out. People will play her. She's not a bad champion. I mean, she's just like a perennial. She's one of the best balanced mid laners in the game. She's just kind of decent at everything, but not amazing at anything in particular. And she's just the perennial, like, 50% win rate champ. I mean, what is her win rate? I haven't looked. I'm just guessing. Yeah, 51.2. So a little above average. She's okay. Good. She's a good autofill. If you're autofilled mid, you're not really sure what to play. Like, that's a respectable pick. You got decent wave clear, decent mobility, like decent damage. It's just she's just not good enough at any sort of one thing to set her apart and make me want to pick her over something else. Okay, Irelia, pretty massive nerf. I listened to LS and Scar's patch notes video earlier today in between student conferences, and LS was really, really high on Irelia. He thought that she was amazing, and this isn't going to matter. I think she's okay, and I think that this does matter a lot. I mean, you can't increase someone's cooldown on their ult by 20 seconds and lower the damage by this amount. I mean, this is 25 on the missile damage when it goes out, and then 50 when people hit the wall. That's 75 damage early on something that does 200 total damage. So if you look at that, like, you can't tell me that lowering somebody's ultimate damage by 38% and increasing the cooldown by, whatever that number is, 14%, right? 1/6, 17%. 17.5%. You can't tell me that lowering the cooldown, or like increasing the cooldown by 17.5% and lowering the damage by 38% is not going to affect a champion. That's going to affect the champion. So that's really, really, that's a massive nerf to her burst damage early. So yeah, can she be good when she gets a ton of items? Does she have other stuff in her kit that makes her good? Sure. She's going to get a little bit better wave clear here. She's going to get some better base armor. That's good. But this is a lot less damage. And I just don't know, why you would want to pick her over Camille, Fiora, Jax, even somebody like a Kled top lane. I just feel like there are so many better champions that are going to be fighters in the top lane. Like, statistically, I mean, she's alright. Like, she's 50%. I've seen some good ones, but I've seen some really bad Fioras too. I think even Yasuo is probably a little bit better. Like, statistically, they're about the same. But Yasuo with Conquer is really, really strong. And the thing about a lot of Yasuo players, at least once you start getting to, gold, platinum, is a lot of those people are one-trick champs. So, I don't know. She's okay. I think there are better options out there. I think she's a bit slow. I think she's going to require a few more items, especially now that her ult doesn't do enough damage. So she's all right. Definitely playable, but, this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt. I think they're just going to be better fighters. Okay, Azir, pretty meaningful nerf. I mean, this is a lot of wave clear damage, right? So taking it from 40% early on to 25%, and then even once you get to level 6, it's still down, going from 70% to 50%. This is going to make it a lot harder for him to deal with people that are pushing into him, and certainly for him to catch up in the wave and roam, to follow people like Talia or Twisted Fate or whomever trying to push him into roam. So I think this is going to hurt him a lot in conjunction with everything else that's been going on. I mean, he's received numerous nerfs over the last few patches. So you might still see him in pro play, but this is a really, really big nerf. If you're not that great on Azir, do not play him. This is, you can still play him if you're a one-trick, Grandmaster of Azir, but I would not play him. I would be very wary of allies who pick this champion. If you see someone pick an Azir, you need to look at their match history, and if they have less than 100 games on Azir, you need to highly consider dodging. I mean, he's at a 44.8% win rate. It's really bad. So unless you are really, really good on that champion, do not play him, and you need to be very suspicious if someone else picks that champion mid lane. And, you know, I saw so many people crying on forums like, oh, they're nerfing for competitive. They keep nerfing Azir and Ryze and all this. They want to keep it fresh, guys. Like, that's the thing, right? Competitive is very important. There are 140 other champions out there you can play. More than 140. There are a ton of champions. Like, yes, if you do like playing Azir, that's great. But the entire game doesn't revolve around Azir mains or Ryze mains or whatever mains. You know, people that have been suppressed by these champions, you know, they're going to be happy. Like, it's not just all about you, right? So I don't know the exact intricacies of mid lane a ton, but, you know, certain champions like Twisted Fate, who are historically pretty good, have probably been pressured out of lane by champions like Azir or by champions like Ryze because they just can't keep up with the raw power those champions had. So people out there who love Twisted Fate that have been, you know, really sad and on the sidelines because they haven't been able to play Twisted Fate in a while, now they can come out and play Twisted Fate. You know, people who maybe liked playing, I don't know, Vel'Koz, maybe they can come out and play Vel'Koz more now because these champions are getting nerfed, right? So you have to think of it in terms of an ecosystem. You know, it's not bad. When they're nerfing one champion, they're indirectly buffing a lot of other champions. And yes, it might suck for you personally if you really like playing Azir or Ryze, but it's cyclical. It'll all come back. You've had a really good season if you've been playing Azir or Ryze main, and you're very good in solo queue, right? It's been your time in the sun for the last, you know, 7 patches or so, but now it's time to let other people have a little fun on their champions. So now people might be able to play their Twisted Fate a bit more. They might be able to play their Diana a little bit more, right? And so they might be able to play their Orianna. Orianna's definitely someone, I think, that's had some major problems because of Azir and Ryze. She's just been outclassed. Or like Victor, right? So, you know, I feel ya. I understand when your favorite champion gets nerfed, it sucks. But it's not Rito out to get you necessarily. And yes, there are people that are much better at pro play on certain champions than solo queue, right? So it looks silly nerfing Azir, who's like 46 or 45% in solo queue, nerfing Ryze, who's 45% in solo queue. But people don't want to see Azir versus Ryze for an entire year of professional play. And that's just what happens if you don't nerf the champions. Then people are just going to keep doing that. Like, yeah, you can buff other champions too. And I do like the buff versus nerf because buffing is more of a feels good. Even though it's two sides of the same coin. When you buff certain champions, you're indirectly nerfing other champions that didn't get those buffs. And when you nerf champions, you're indirectly buffing other champions that didn't get those nerfs. So it's two sides of the same coin. But I think buffing stuff does make people feel better. So yes, I wish they would just directly buff things, you know, like Heimerdinger, right? I think Heimer has a lot of potential. He has a really interesting, you know, neat kit. Lots of possibilities. I wish they would buff people like Orianna. I think she has a lot of cool interactions. I wish they'd buff Victor. He's got some cool stuff going on. So yeah, I wish they'd buff stuff, but you know, a lot of times it's just easier to identify, okay, this is the big problem. This champion's overpowered. We need to bring him down a notch. So, anyways, I don't think that Riot is just trying to hate on everybody that plays any champion ever and just sacrifice the game so it's only a pro game, but it's all about balance. Right, it's about balance. And so sometimes if things are really strong in pro play, you know, you got to nerf them a little bit in solo queue. Now, that's not always true. There are some things in pro play that stay pretty strong for a while that don't get nerfs in solo queues. Think of like Thresh or something. He's almost always viable one way or another in pro play, but he doesn't get nerfed that often. Sometimes, but not that often. Something like Orianna gets played all the time in pro play, or at least historically, she's been one of the most picked mid laners of all time. She very rarely gets nerfs. So it's not like just because something's popular in pro play that it's always going to get nerfs. Or that it's always, going to get nerfed, but, you know, some things that are just very oppressive and not letting people, they're limiting the freedom of picks in pro play because they're too strong, you got to nerf it. So, anyways, that's how I feel about Azir. So, yeah, do I think he deserved this last nerf? Probably not. I mean, the problem with these nerfs, too, and I didn't realize this until it was explained to me. I don't remember which content creator did this. I think it was Freak when I was watching Freak's patch notes from a patch or two ago. They start testing these things before they have data, a lot of data from the current patch. So this stuff on 8.8... there hasn't been much professional play. Like, all of the North American stuff and European stuff was played on 8.5 for the end of the spring split. You got some Korean data for 8.6. There was zero data on 8.7. And so I think they're just slapping on too many nerfs on things that were problematic in 8.5. So Azir is one of those. Rise is one of those. Braum and Tom are some of those. And they've already been nerfed enough, but they just don't have data, and they just keep nerfing them. So I think that they have over-nerfed some of these things at one point. So I'll grant you that. But anyways, I don't think that Riot just hates solo queue people. I mean, Zed is another champion. Like, there are some high skill cap champions that pros can play pretty well. They just choose not to play them because they're dangerous and they don't get nerfed in solo queue. So, like, Katarina, very fun high skill cap champion. Zed, Yasuo. All of these champs are not necessarily getting nerfed. It's just the Azir and Ryze because they're really hot right now. And you have to know that when you're playing Azir, when you're playing Ryze, champions like that, LeBlanc, which is coming up, which I just warned you about, you have to know when you're playing those champions, there's a very high probability that if the champion is good, pros will abuse it, and it will have to be either nerfed or it's going to be banned all the time. You just have to know that when you're signing up, right? There are just certain types of champions that are historically very difficult to balance, that are going to draw a lot of attention and a lot of spotlight when they're really good. And I warned you about that in my one trick video if you've watched that on my channel. If you haven't watched it, great video. Be sure to check it out. It's one of the most, it is by far the most viewed video on the channel. It's got 135,000 compared to most of my other guides that are like 3,000 or 4,000. So it's super, super popular on the channel. But that's one thing that I'll warn about, is that you don't want to one-trick something that is very difficult to balance, that will draw a lot of pro attention. Okay, so if you like Azir, I'm sorry, that's just how it works with Azir or Ryze, okay? That's part of their thing, is they're really fun. They have unique kits that makes them difficult to balance because they're so different from other champions. Anyways, let's move on. Okay, Braum. So I feel you out there, Jason. If you watch these, I don't know if my boy watches these notes, but my real-life buddy is an Azir main, and I know he's just kind of probably facepalming at some of these nerfs, but unfortunately, that's how it goes sometimes. Okay, so Braum, armor growth lowered, resistances lowered to 10. This is the last thing that you level up. So, you know, you're going to be just missing 8 armor in most fights a lot of time, and you're not going to give that to your allies well. This is a fairly minor buff to him. They had been thinking about nerfing, or nerf to him rather, not buff. They had been thinking about nerfing his shield, but ultimately they decided against that. I mean, the thing about Braum and Tom got a nerf too on this patch, is they are disproportionately really good. And I've talked about this all the time on the channel. People are always like, why? You know, people are all over the spectrum on me, or on about tank supports, right? There are some people who, like, just vehemently disagree with me. Like, there was one guy who, on my last patch notes, was like, and then, I'm not talking about Mean Bunny here. I love my boy Mean Bunny. But there's this other guy that I hadn't recognized before on the channel who was like, this tier list sucks. You're so dumb. That's a terrible meta call. Tanks are awesome right now. They're really overpowered. And I don't know why you're saying these stupid champions like Nami and Janna and these enchanters are really strong. Like, blah, blah, blah. It's like, let's take a look. What are the most successful supports last patch? Oh, it looks like it's all enchanters. Basically. Right? All the way down. And the highest win rate champions. What are those? Oh, look at that. There's not a single tank until you get down to Blitzcrank at 50%, who's like the 10th champion down. Right? Like, it's not my opinion that these champions are strong. Yes, I was right about that. But it's not just me. It's not like I just magically come up with these ideas that enchanters are strong. Any credible tier list is going to make us strong. Anyone who looks at statistics is going to realize enchanters are too strong for all the reasons I've described. So yes, they are too strong. And so, there's a spectrum of people that, fight me tooth and nail and think that I'm wrong about this and that tanks are going to be really good. I've been calling this for several patches, 3 or 4 patches, that we were seeing a shift to enchanters, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger every patch as they nerf tanks more and more and more. So the disconnect that I was talking about before is that at professional level play, You have much tighter communication, much tighter organized team fights, and that makes pure supports a lot better when you can protect somebody who's a very high-level franchise player, like a Doublelift, or, some other AD carry, Bang, or someone like that who's really good, right? Prey. These people that are really, really good, and AD carries are extremely strong right now, just because of the way that they itemize. And so when you can protect a really good player, then Braum and Tom are great. When you can set up team fights, when you're going to have organized 5v5 fights, they're great. However, in solo queue, where it's not organized, where you can't always count on your AD carry, where people may not follow up with what you're doing, where games, and Braum and Tom operate on very, very low gold also. They're extremely strong, at 1 or 2 items because they don't need gold. Like, Braum doesn't need gold to throw up his shield. Tom doesn't need gold to eat somebody with his W, right? So the scaling doesn't matter as much in pro play because you're going to have to buy so many control wards. The kill counts are going to be so low that you're just not going to get many items. However, in solo queue, once you can start to afford, on supports 3, maybe even 4 items in some games, scaling does start to matter quite a lot, and that's where the plus healing and shielding really kicks in. It's a lot of these champions up near the top, they have really good healing and shielding. And I've talked about this in past video. I have an entire video on scaling on the channel. If you want to check that out, I talk about why this is important. But basically, when you start getting champions that scale off of both AP and plus healing and shielding, and they have really high base shields and base healing because of the way that interacts with resistances, with armor and magic resist, it makes them almost impossible to beat in team fights. When you get like a Janna, or a Sona, or a Lulu, or even like a Nami or something later on, tanks can't deal with that. It's just too difficult to deal with that. So, you have to be so this is why Braum is really good in pro play, but not so great in solo queue, and the same thing with Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench even more so because Tom, half the time when you eat somebody with his W in solo queue, they just spit themselves right back out and go back in and die. Half the time you can't get the jungler to come down and use your ult for a free gank and free kills bot lane, even if you ping it and ping your ultimate and explain it to them. Come down here, I will give you free kills. They still won't do it half the time. And so, there's just so many things that require you to be on the same page that's why they're going to have a lower win percent in solo queue and a higher win percent in pro play. So that's why it's not like they're just trying to, just take a dump on everybody who likes to play tanks. It's because it's a completely different game, pro play from solo queue. So that's why you're going to see Tahm Kench down here at 46% win rate. And someone like Braum at sub 50%. These champions are almost never going to be much higher than 50% because it requires too much coordination. Janna is just really easy to play, and it just doesn't require as much team coordination. She's excellent at the Fiesta. Same thing with Nami. Same thing with Sona. Because of the scaling, if you ever get to 30 minutes, these champions are just going to crush everybody else because of the scaling built into their kit. So that's what's at play. It's not that they hate tank supports. It's that pro players just use them a lot better. Another problem that I constantly talk about on the channel when we're talking about tank supports is other lanes poach their items. So you have junglers taking Locket. You have Gangplank taking Relic Shield top lane. You have AD carries, a few patches ago taking Relic. I guess that's 7 patches ago at this point. Taking Relic Shield to sustain themselves in lane. So you have junglers taking Nice Vow a while ago. Junglers taking things like Aftershock. Junglers taking Guardian. Right? And so all of this stuff has to get nerfed. And a big part of that is support items are balanced to be really cheap, right? They're supposed to be 2,200 gold, 2,300 gold because supports are in an entirely different gold ecosystem. They just need much cheaper items if they're going to get to that, 3 or 4 items, which Riot really wants them to get to so people can have fun, so people can buy items. Back in the day, Season 1, Season 2, supports never got to buy items. You just bought 30 wards a game, there was no Sightstone, and you might be able to buy an Aegis of the Legion, which was 1,900 gold. But by and large, you just had no items. And so Riot wants support to be fun. You want support to be a cool, fun role to play. People need to understand that. Scarra was complaining about supports. He's like, supports are too powerful, blah, blah, blah. And I do agree with most of what Scarra says, but you have to understand this. Most people hate playing support, okay? Because it's not, people just don't think that it's fun. I like it. I love support. Most people on this channel love support, I assume, which is why they're here. But you got to understand, the vast majority of the population that plays League does not want to support because they don't think it's fun. You don't get a lot of kills. You feel like you don't have a huge impact. There's this huge myth out there where there's no way you can carry a support. Supports suck. They're just e-girls. And, you know, all these other stereotypes out there, right? Where they're just these simple face roll champions and you just have to get carried to victory. Riot really wants to end that, right? They really want to show that supports can be very important. Supports make meaningful choices and have big impacts in fights and on the game, and they should do that because you need people to play it. If nobody plays support, all of the queue times go up 5 minutes, right? And then you have to deal with all auto-filled supports, and then they're going to rage and it increases toxicity, all this stuff. So you want people to play support. And you have to really sell it to them because a lot of people do not like playing support, right? And so you want support to be meaningful. You want it to be fun, interactive. That's why they've created these big, powerful items. Supports have some of the most interesting itemization options and paths that can all be very powerful in different ways. When you think of things like Locket, like Redemption, like Ardent Sensor, recently even like Banner of Command, stuff like that. These can be really high-impact items that supports control that are really fun and cool. So, you know, but the problem with that is if other lanes get that and they're getting more gold than supports get, it creates imbalances. So when you have Zac who can buy like a Knight's Vow for, you know, 2,200 gold and can just bypass all of those other tank items that are usually budgeted to be like, you know, 2,900 gold, then that means he's going to hit his power spike a lot faster, and that's going to make tanks too strong. When they can buy Locket for 2,300 gold, it's going to make tanks in other roles too strong. And so that's why it's very difficult to balance tank supports, is because other roles poach those tank items because they're cheaper, efficient, and very powerful because they made them that way to make supports cool and fun to play, but other lanes are abusing that. And so that's why it's very difficult to balance tank supports. Whereas with enchanters, no one else uses those items hardly, except for Ivern, and they just nerfed him into the ground. But, like, you know, you're not going to see your top laner rushing a Redemption. You know, you're not going to see most mid laners rushing Ardent Sensor, with the exception of maybe, like, Karma, who's kind of seeing some fringe play in the mid lane. It's just not a problem. It doesn't get poached as often in other lanes as the tank items do. So that's why, balance-wise, it's very difficult to create a meta where you can have tanks near the top, or at least competitive for a top 5 support slot, without their items being too strong and being abused in other lanes. Because it's difficult to balance that. How do you make it to where people don't want to buy the items in other lanes? I've proposed a solution to this, saying you should have a stat called Support Power, which doesn't activate until you get your Tier 3 ward item. So in other words, like something like Knight's Vow, you couldn't get that partnered active unless you had the Tier 3 gold item. And you could even make it more powerful. Maybe instead of 12%, it absorbs or trades like 15% or something. But then only supports could get it, or only people who want to invest in that full Tier 3 warding item could get it. You could make something like Ardent Sensor, you know, to balance it out, where you don't get that active, or you don't get that passive, rather, unless someone gets to the Tier 3 ward item. So you could do that on any item you want to be a support item that's going to be cheap, efficient, and powerful. Just make it to where, look, the cool part of this item doesn't turn on until you get a Tier 3 ward item, and that will stop other lanes from getting it. Then you could actually even put a bit more power into it. You could put a bit more armor on that item. You could make the active even more powerful, even more interesting, because then you don't have to worry about other lanes poaching those items, because it's going to be very cost inefficient to do that, because they're going to have to buy the ward item. That's the way to do it. Hopefully Riot figures that out. They could do it for all classes of support. You could even do that for, like, mid laners. You could make something like Twin Shadows, which is a really cool ghost item. You could make those ghosts even more powerful, put it on a lower cooldown, you know, give them some other kind of debuff. Maybe when they touch somebody, you know, they take extra damage for a few seconds or something like that. You could give them all kinds of cool stuff. But you can't do that right now because mid lane would abuse it. But if you made it support power, then they wouldn't use it. Same thing with, like, Shurelya's. So, I think that's the future. I think that's what they should do. But in the meantime, Braum's going to get nerfed again for pro play. He's already barely viable for solo queue. And that just sucks for people who like Braum. So, anyways, until they come up with a stat like support power, that's going to continue to be a balancing concern. Okay, we're going to move it up here because I do want to try to get through these in like an hour. I know I spent a long time talking about that. But that's something that needs to be talked about because people don't understand sometimes, and people just rage on these forums. Well, people rage about everything on forums, but they don't understand why tanks are so difficult to balance. Both the difference between pro level and solo queue tanks, and then also why tank items are constantly getting nerfed. So hopefully now you know, now you understand. You may not like it, but hopefully you understand it. And I hope Riot understands it too, and takes me up on that offer of going for a stat called support power. Just finally just says, look, straight up, no one else is going to get support items. No one else is going to get access to this unless you get a tier 3 wood item. And that would make balancing support a dream. That would be so much better, so much easier. And I'm telling you, supports would love it if they did that. Like, you might at first think, well, that sucks. I have to get my tier 3 wood item. But if they can make those items more powerful, the support items, if they can make them cooler and more powerful, because they're gated by that need to upgrade the ward item and no one else is going to poach them, then you're going to like it. Then it's going to be a lot more fun. Okay, Galio, meaningful nerf. He's not that great in solo queue right now. I mean, there's a lot of damage out there right now. Damage outstrips tankiness in a lot of instances, especially because of the Conquer rune. I mean, this guy just gets torn up by a lot of other champions, like a Fiora or, a Camille, a Jax. All these champions are going to tear him up a lot of times right now, even like a Rise or a Cassiopeia. So I don't think he's that much of a problem. I guess you see him in competitive some for sure in the mid lane, but this is going to hurt competitive a little bit. 20 seconds early on is a big deal, but 40 seconds later is a huge deal. So he was already kind of a questionable pick. You don't see him a lot. I guess. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's not going to affect the solo queue pecking order that much. I don't think he was picked that much. I don't think he won that much. No, he's at 46%. So that's kind of for pro play, I guess. I'm trying to think of why they would do that. I mean, because you want a champion like Galio to be viable so that you can counteract things like Fizz, things like LeBlanc. I don't know. I don't know. There's just going to be less counterplay to Fizz and LeBlanc, but whatever. It's not going to affect solo queue that much. It might affect pro play a little bit. What's up, Chief? I did. I got out a bit early. Some students rescheduled.
I had to go to the consignment store.
Okay.
Keep rid of some stuff.
Is Rory asleep?
Hopefully, yes.
She's snoozing.
Yes.
I say. She seemed okay with me getting her up early today. I think she's just kind of cool with whatever.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Miss Kelly thinks she has your personality.
Ha!
Laid back.
Aren't you laid back too, dear?
No, not as much as you.
It's true.
I'm laid back about some things.
This is true. Okay. Have fun.
Okay.
Graves, decent little buff. I mean, this isn't enough to matter. Like, Kha'Zix just outshines him. Graves is heavily dependent on lethality and just sort of one-shotting people, and that's just not good enough right now. Kha'Zix makes it because he just does so much damage that it doesn't matter that lethality's been nerfed, and a lot of that's because of his invisibility in the jungle, which they really need a nerf, but it's not going to matter. He just, he's going to get just murdered by a lot of the Bruiser and other assassin people. Shaco and Kha'Zix will kill him. Warwick will just, out-attrition and beat him down. Eve is actually getting pretty strong right now. I just don't know why you would ever want to pick him in the jungle. Like, he's okay. I mean, he's hit dead even 50%. It's okay, sure. I don't think it's gonna matter that much though. Lower cooldown on his ult. It's none of this is extra damage, which is what he needs. Okay, the Janna changes don't matter. I mean, Janna basically starts the game at something like 378 move speed or something with her usual runes and itemization off of her W. That's faster than most people with boots. So she basically starts off with like boots 2. From level 1 if she just puts a point into her W, so 5 move speed's not going to be a huge deal. And Zephyr, 5 damage off of that. I thought that LS put this best, which is hilarious. That's basically like if you're using W even often in lane, that's 1 auto attack difference. That's like you didn't land 1 auto. You know, if you hit somebody, you know, like 8 times with your W, or even 9 times in lane with W before you back, you drain like all of your mana and just drop all of these W's on them. That's like the equivalent of not hitting them with 1 auto attack, with 1 Janna auto over the course of like 4 minutes. It doesn't matter. It's insignificant. So like what makes Janna oppressive is she's very safe, she's very reliable, and she scales really hard later into the game. That's what makes her too strong. And so I think they just need to add more skill expression to her kit. I think a lot of reasons people hate Janna is because there's just not a way to counter her that well. Like, you could play a hard engaged champ like an Alistar or a Leona, and yeah, you can kind of get her, but she's good against those champions later if she uses her tornado correctly or her ultimate. Like, being able to heal your entire team to full and push everybody back with that ult is so strong. And I love Janna. I mean, Janna's been historically probably my most played champion, certainly one of my highest win rate champions, so I really like her. But I think they need to figure out like what's cool about Janna's kit, what do we want to emphasize, and what's toxic about her kit. So if I were the balance team, I would increase the tornado speed. I think that's one of the worst changes that they made. I would lower the cooldown on tornado. Lower the damage if you have to. I think it might actually be kind of cool to keep the damage, maybe even increase it a little bit. Just to give her like some wave clear if she needed that a little bit. So that's what I would do to kind of buff her. In exchange, though, I would lower the damage on this Zephyr significantly. Wait a minute, those numbers aren't right. Her W, I thought, dealt like 280 or something at max rank. Hold on, let me look at this. Those numbers, I'm pretty sure they aren't correct. Look at this. Really? I thought her W did something crazy earlier. I really want to look this up now because I feel like it didn't used to be 240. Wasn't it 280, or am I just crazy? I thought it was some like absurdly high number. I'm very suspicious of this. Was this like a stealth nerf? Like a lot of a stealth nerf? So she's getting 45 per level. I thought, didn't it used to be like something crazy, like 60 or 65 per level? Do I have a Janna Season 8 guide? I don't remember if I do or not. Okay, I have an older Janna guide. I'm not going to go through the whole
Janna
thing
guides.
here. This is going to... But I just want to see where I pull up the wiki here. I don't know if I have a Season 8 one or not. I might. Shuffled in there somewhere. But I just want to see the wiki. Or I have a picture of the old wiki. Comparing it to Lulu, comparing it to Karma. Yeah. Look at this. 280. I'm not blind. It's 280. Right? It's 55 per level. It went from 60 to 115 to 170 to 225 to 280. Now, this was in 2017. Did they nerf it a while back and I just wasn't? Eye of the Storm nerf, Tailwind nerf. Cost increase. Cooldown reduced 8 seconds from 12. Sorry, this is going to be a second. I just want to do research on this because this is breaking news. This is like really big breaking news if I'm right about this. Yeah, there's nothing in here that says it ever decreased the damage. That's back in Season 5. There's no way it's that old because I recorded that video in Season 7. So they would have had to have nerfed it. Cooldown, slow, bonus movement speed, range, Howling Gale. Unless that's a glitch, I'll have to check in-game. Yeah, because it says it was this from 240. It was not 240. It was 280. This is saying, oh, it was only going up by 45 per level, right? This was only 45 per level. That's false. Because if we look at this right here, it was going up by 55 per level. Yeah. That's 280. Let me see. Let me check my, I want to look at just one more thing here. Yes, I don't have a new Janna one, I don't think, unless it's... But I do think that... Support tier list. Okay, Janna. See if I pull up the Wikia here. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on. Hold on there, cowboy. Yeah, look at this. This is from last patch. 280. It goes from 60, gaining 55 per level, to 280. What, it's at 170 at tier 3. Now it's at 145. Nobody noticed this. Skara didn't notice it. LS didn't notice it, but they're not Janna players. They're not support players. I am. I noticed this stuff. That's too low. So if these numbers are correct, if this is actually what they're saying, they nerfed it by 30 at level 5. And they nerfed it by 45 at level 5. That is significant. That is a lot of damage on her W that's been knocked off. So early on, this is accurate. It was 60, but it went to 280. Unless they are incorrect in these patch notes, which they were. They tried to pull a fast one. Whoever did these patch notes failed big time, because if you watch Scar's patch notes videos and LS patch notes video, and when I talked about the patch notes a couple of days ago, they didn't have this for Xayah either. They said it was just a decrease of like 3 AD, and they didn't have this passive, and they just snuck it in here last night on stream, and I was like, wait a minute, am I crazy? And then I went back, and if you go and watch LS's video and Scar's video where they talk about Xayah, they don't mention this, because it didn't exist when they shot that video. They shoot those videos the day the patch is released, and then it takes them a couple of days to produce it and release it, which is standard for videos, but... And they didn't even mention that they stealth changes. They're just not like, oops, we forgot to mention Xayah stuff up at the top. You would just never know. So anyways, either they goofed in recording this, just like they goofed with Xayah and got that wrong, or this is a massive nerf. I mean, that's a big, big deal. That's a 30 damage nerf on her W early on. That is a big deal. So that might actually make a difference in her laning phase, because usually you'll get like 3 points in W in lane to do damage. So that's a secret thing, the strategy professor. I'm probably going to be the only person who notices that, of a major content creator. I mean, I'm not super major, but, you know, of like a content creator with 20,000 subs or more. I don't think a lot of other people are going to notice that. But if that's actually true, that is a big, big nerf. Now, is that enough to throw her out of the meta? No. I think she's still going to be really strong for the reasons I described before. But it's certainly something to consider that her laning phase is going to be much, much weaker than it is right now if she's actually losing 30 damage on this. So that'll be interesting to see. But that's kind of weird that they're kind of throwing a fast one on you there. And not telling you. Because I remember 280 sounding like a really huge number for maxing W, which it was, but it's just kind of sketchy that they didn't mention that here. Like, they're just casually, oh, max level, does 45 less damage. So, anyways, before I notice that, what I think they should do with Janna, make her tornado more meaningful. That's skill expression in her kit. That allows you to stop other people from getting onto your team. That allows you to stop, Zac or Lee Sin or just all kinds of champions trying to jump into you. And that's cool. That's a good, feels good moment. You're like, man, I got outplayed by that Janna. She blocked me with her tornado. I mean, it's bad if you're trying to go in, but that's something where you're like, okay, that's a good Janna player. They stopped the Alistar headbutt combo, they stopped Zac, whatever. Feels good. So you would want more of that. So lower the cooldown on the tornado. Make the tornado happen, make it go out faster. If it's fully charged, make it wave clear a little bit more. In exchange, lower the damage on the W. It looks like they've already done that a lot. You could lower the damage on the W. Maybe the W doesn't give you movement speed in combat. It's only when you're out of combat you get that bonus movement speed. That could be something they could do. Just lower her speed a little bit. They could lower her range. So make the range on her shield, instead of 800, make it 650 to kind of match Lulu's range. So that you have to be a little bit closer to the action, or maybe even 700 range. Just something in there. Just make her get closer to the action to shield people. That could make her a little less safe. Make it to where when you put the shield on somebody, maybe they don't get the extra AD unless the shield breaks. Once the shield breaks, then they get the AD for 5 seconds. Because right now they get the AD until the shield breaks. When it breaks, they lose the AD. And that does create an interesting trade-off. Do you want to put it on someone where the shield's going to break, or do you want to put it on somebody who can just use it for the damage? And right now, I feel like in a lot of fights, you just put it on your AD carry just so they do a lot of extra damage, and it helps you with tower push and stuff too. But just find some way to make that shield be a little bit more skill expression. Maybe she throws a projectile, and the first person that it hits, the first ally that it hits or something, would give them a shield. Kind of like Lux, but for just one person. So that way you at least have to kind of aim it. That could be interesting. So, I don't know, just throw a little bit more expression in her kit. Just lower her numbers, lower the safe, easy stuff a little bit, and just add more cool stuff in there. Using your ult is cool. Maybe you lower the healing on your ult, so it doesn't heal for as much, and in exchange, you lower the cooldown on it, so you can use that push, that knockback effect. Maybe instead of healing, it gives people shields. That could be another thing. So it's not permanent health, it's temporary health to use in combat. So if the enemy successfully, if you disengage them as Janna, and your team, and they successfully are okay, well, we're going to back all the way up, then your team loses that shield, and the enemy can re-engage on you. So instead of just healing people for 500 damage, maybe it would give them or for 500 health, each person, maybe it would give them a 500 shield for 5 seconds or something like that. I don't know if you should give everybody the extra AD off of that, although that'd be worth considering if they did get some kind of other buff. But just something like that where, you're just giving her a clear identity. She's the disengaged champion. We're going to let her do her ult knockback. We're going to let her use her Q to knockback. And we're going to take away some of her shielding power. And we're going to take away some of her free movement off of W, especially in combat. Maybe lower her healing amount. And just balance her like that. Just take her cool stuff and get rid of the safe stuff. It's just brain dead, simple, too powerful. So yeah, really interesting news there if that's how they lower the W. It's not going to be enough. She'll still be really strong, but that would be a lot more significant than this at first appears. Okay, Kai'Sa, how long are we going here? We're going too long. We need to finish up. Not going to matter. Still super strong. Yeah, they lowered the ratio on the Q, but, you know, lowering it by 0.5 is a thing. But keep in mind also, she doesn't get a lot of bonus attack damage. She gets some. Like, she'll get Death Dance, Ginsu, Nashor's is the best thing. Nashor's doesn't have any AD on it, so that's not going to matter for that. She still has a huge Q. This doesn't affect her Q ratio. It's just her AP ratio on her Q. It's just the AD. I think she'll be fine. She has a lot of excess damage. What really makes her strong is her interaction with Death's Dance and Q. So as long as that is coded as a single target ability and heals her for like a third of her health whenever she Qs a minion wave, she's going to be too strong. So I still think she'll be the number 1 AD carry. I think she's probably a little over Jhin after playing against both of them. She's just a lot more reliable. She's easier to play. A very good Jhin player can potentially be better than she is if the Jhin really pressures early. But a lot of Jhins just realistically don't do that. So I think she's number 1 right now. Jhin is still a top 5, but she's definitely number 1. So yeah, is this going to hurt her? A little bit. I mean, it's going to be most impactful like right when she buys Death's Dance. She's not going to get as much damage off of it, but it's not going to matter as much. And then, you know, Ginsu's, it'll matter a little bit. She stacks up, but it's mostly for the double hit in her passive on Ginsu's. And then it's not going to matter at all when she gets Nashor's, because that's, you know, you're not getting any AD off of that anyway, so. Okay. Lissandra, not going to matter. Lissandra's interesting, but her problem is her numbers are just too low, and her ranges are too low. She has a cool kit. I like it, no pun intended there, but she has a kit that's good, that's enjoyable. You know, I like this choice of the ult of being able to CC somebody or having the choice of CCing yourself in exchange for healing a lot and creating this ice field. I think that's really cool. That's a cool choice. It's a cool interaction. It's good mind games with people. So it's a really fun design. Glacial Path is interesting. You can use it for wave clear, but you can also use it, you know, to warp somewhere. AoE Root is okay. So, like, she's kind of designed to be sort of this, like, almost melee combat mage. But she doesn't have the stats to back that up. She has really low health. She has really low health regen, really low armor. Wow, that's low armor. 20 armor. What? Is that real? Janna has, like, 28? What? That's ludicrously low, and her move speed's 325. That's so bad. So if they want her to do that, they need to give her high move speed. You know, they need to give her like 340 move speed, something like that, 335 at least, so she can actually get close enough to use these abilities. This passive sucks. This is awful. It's like you get one free spell every now and then when you do something. It's not interactive. It's not fun. It's just something that you get. It sucks, and it forces you to like make the cost of everything else really expensive just to balance out her mana. Just get rid of this, give her a new passive, give her like a standard Freljord type of passive that has CC. Maybe when she slows somebody, it could be like a Braum type of thing, where if they auto-attack somebody, then it adds little shards to them, and then eventually they get stunned. Or something like a Sejuani, where if it's, you know, they get enough stacks on them, you could use one of your abilities to freeze them and then do percentage health damage. That would be interesting if she was like a mage mid lane, like CC person that did percentage health damage. That'd be pretty cool. Just some kind of interaction with the frozen stuff, with the frost. Or you could do like an Anivia thing, where if they're frozen or whatever, they take a little bit of extra damage from some of your abilities. Or maybe it lowers the cooldown of your abilities. That would be a cool idea, right? Like if you hit somebody with Ice Shard and they're frozen, then you hit them with Ring of Frost, you get a refund of like 30% or something, or 50% of your Ring of Frost. So then if you're constantly like chaining your abilities together, then you constantly get more abilities back up. Kind of like, I think Rise used to have that, but they could do a little bit more like that. Just something cool like that combos like your slows together with something meaningful. Like this is really lazy design, and it's just bad. So they need to get rid of that. This costs too much mana. Why does it cost 75 at level 1? Why not like somewhere between 55 to 75? Look at this damage. 190 damage max level, for real? On something that's only 725 range that costs 75 mana? That's stupid. Like, that's so much lower. If you look at like how much damage does LeBlanc have, how much damage does Echo have, or Fizz, or if you want to look at like another control mage like Orianna or Taliyah, They have way, way more damage than this. Talia's Q does like over 400 damage with like 150% ratio or something ridiculous on it. Like, this is way, way too low. This needs to, at a minimum, be 240 damage. At a minimum. To be respectable. Like, yeah, you can spam it, but it's a really slender skill shot with low range. It slows people for a little bit. It needs to do at least 240 damage. This is 450 range. With a 14-second cooldown. And it only has like a 1-second root. I mean, that's embarrassing. Like this, with a 0.4. This is awful. A 24-second cooldown on this. Why does it need to be 24 seconds? Is it really that strong? Level 1, it's that strong where it's got to be 80 mana cost with a 24-second cooldown. This in and of itself doesn't even crowd control anybody. It does pathetic damage. It's like 70 damage level 1. Why on earth is this a 24-second cooldown? Like, normalize this. Make it like 16 to 12. Down 1 second per level. Something like that. Like, that's absolutely absurd that it's that much. And then this is a really cool ability, but they need to give this some more spice. It only does 150 damage, which is ridiculous. And it only has 550 range. That's like auto attack range. That's way too low. This needs to be at least 650 so you can catch people with it. If they want it to be something like you need to go in with your W to get close enough to entomb somebody with your ultimate, like there needs to be more payoff because that's very dangerous if you go in and CC the enemy. Like maybe if you ult yourself, healing yourself is cool, but it needs to do something more with the freeze effect. They could do that with the passive. So, like, I can just see something that would be really sweet where, like, let's say she just had something like a Braum passive, right? Where if she goes in with her Frozen Tomb and ults herself, then, maybe anyone who gets hit by that freeze gets applied like a Braum passive, and then if they get auto-attacked, then they can get stunned after that. Then that would give her good utility, because then she could effectively go in, start a fight, put this little, like, debuff on people, where if they get auto-attacked, then they end up getting frozen, and then stunned. Or maybe if you didn't want it to be like Braum, if you thought that was too powerful, just say something like, if you get enough stacks or something, or if enemies get enough stacks, then all of a sudden this Ring of Frost, like, does, a 2-second stun or something like that with it. Just something where when she goes in, she freezes herself, it does something meaningful rather than a little bit of damage and a slow. Like, she needs some Freljord stuff. She needs some stun. She needs, like, some stuns, some percentage damage, something like that. Something like a Sejuani or Braum to rework her passive, lower the mana cost on this, lower the cooldowns. Good. Could be a fun champion. Great kit. Just really poor balancing. This doesn't help. But at least they've got their eye on her, and hopefully they do something with her soon. Okay, Nautilus, pretty good buffs. It's not going to matter. He can't be played top lane because Conqueror's a rune right now. He doesn't have any percentage damage in his kit. So you can't do that this day and age, top lane with Nautilus. Now, what they did with Nautilus to nerf him out of the meta was they lowered his wave clear, so they made his E do a lot less damage overall. And then they made it cost a lot more mana, so it's 10 more mana per. Now, giving him 66 extra mana helps that early, so that means that you could, in theory, cast, like, maybe 5 more E's in lane early on, because that mana and it would cost the same amount as the pre-nerf mana, which is great. But later on, you're still not going to be able to wave clear that much, because it's going to be 10 every time you use it, and then when you're trying to split push, you're going to end up using your E a lot more than just 5 or 6 times. So, what I would do with Nautilus is just make him a split push roam champion. I think that's something that would make him unique, interesting. So you're going to basically say, look, this guy pushes really fast. He doesn't do a lot of damage. We want to take the damage out of his kit. So he's not going to be able to keep up with a Fiora or a Camille or even something like a Maokai or an Ornn. That's not what he does. Okay? But just give him, like, extra damage to minions on his E. That would help him jungle, too. If you said it was, like, minions and monsters, he take an extra 50% damage from his E. Or something like that, right? That would give him a pretty unique perspective where he's a tank that pushes really fast. He has good mobility with his hook. Now, they've lowered this. He can actually use his hook to jump around the map. They changed that a while back. Um, and they've given him some kind of stealth buffs, like quite a few over time. Like they have their eye on him. They want him to be, back into viability. He is a cool champ. If we kind of look at his history here, he's had some buffs. Like he's got a couple here. He got a couple of buffs in the preseason somewhere. Yeah, 7-18. They keep buffing his Q for some reason. But yeah, you can use it on terrain. I thought it lowered the cooldown. It gives you mana back. Does it lower the cooldown also? I thought it lowered the cooldown by like 4 or 5. Yeah, cooldown's lowered by 50%, and you get half the mana cost back. So that means you can use this to rotate, right? So they've already got this in his kit, where that's something that makes him different from other hook champions, like a Thresh or like a Blitzcrank when you're thinking of the support role. So he can actually use this to escape, to get away, right? So, the thing about Nautilus, well, a lot of times you don't see him where people pick Thresh and pick Blitz, is because their hooks can go over walls. So they can pull people, out of mid lane, over into the bushes or something, people who are near the Wraith area. They can just pull people over walls and make plays like that. Nautilus can't do that because his hook intercepts a wall. But now they're trying to make it to where it's like, okay, he can't do that, but he gets a lot of extra mobility. So if someone is going to gank him, he can escape by using that dredge line. Or he can use the dredge line to rotate around the map a little faster. And I think that's cool. That gives him a unique identity. So why not play into that rotation effect a little bit more? Why not just say, okay, he can just dredge line and just kind of zip around the map a little bit to get to places. He's not going to do a lot of damage, but he does have a lot of CC. So that's what I would do, is I would just say, fine, we're going to give him back his wave clear. Maybe we don't want to give him that much damage, right? Because you're usually only going to hit someone with one wave, which is like 175. And that's the other big thing they nerfed about him. So they nerfed his mana cost on his E, because he used to be really strong back in the day. And then 7-15, they did make his Q do more damage, which is kind of whatever. But his depth charge cooldown is really nice. Extra 20 seconds is good. But he was like a premier bully tank back in Season 6, and that was before Ornn and before Maokai got reworked. And, before Poppy was really strong, I think. So he was really good back then. But this is what they did to him. So they nerfed his damage from 200 to 175, and then the maximum damage was reduced from 400 to 350. So they nerfed his damage, and then they even nerfed it here. So it basically went from 220 down to 175. So that's a lot. That was 45 less damage. Remember, Janna just got nerfed, I think, by 35 damage. So 35 damage is a lot. So this was reduced by 45 damage. And they reduced a bunch of stuff here. They reduced Riptide. Okay, they buffed it a little bit here. But anyways, they've been tinkering with him. But what they need to do, I don't remember where they increased the mana cost. Oh, right here, 7-8. So they moved it from 40 to 50. So they need to bring his mana cost back down, or give him some innate way to get more mana. So maybe if he kills a minion, he gets some mana back or something. I don't know, but give him better mana management. And just say, okay. And just give him extra damage against minions and monsters. So that way he doesn't do the same amount of huge damage in team fights, so you're not giving him back that 220 damage in team fights. Then maybe it doesn't even need to be 50% more damage to minions and monsters. Maybe just 25% would be enough. But just give him really good wave clear off of that Riptide. Make sure that he's not going to run out of mana after casting 3 of these late game. And then just let him roam and do some CC and just disrupt fights. I think that would be really cool. So hopefully they do that. Hopefully this does extra damage to minions and monsters. That would make him viable in the jungle. That would help him out with his wave clear. It wouldn't matter as much for support. A little bit. Could give him, if it's the mana cost is low enough early and he gets enough bonus damage, that could help you with certain kinds of push lanes. Like if you had a Caitlyn or a Sivir on your team, Riptide would solidify you as a tank who can actually help push, which there aren't other tanks that can do that effectively. Because Riptiding is not going to change your ability to all in, because it's on a pretty low cooldown a lot of times. You'd still have your Q available and your W. So you could safely Riptide in lane a lot of times to help push without putting your your AD carry in danger. I can't think of another tank that can do that really well. Like, Tom and Braum don't push that well. Alistar can't push unless he uses his Q. Thresh can use his Flay, I guess, but that's not going to be super effective to push. So yeah, I mean, that would make him a unique support too, where he could be an early push support that has a lot of CC later on. I think that's perfect. That is perfect. If they lower his mana cost and have it do extra damage to minions and monsters and just say he's going to be a push and roam tank with a lot of CC and very low damage, legit. If they need to nerf the straight damage on this, like maybe they need to take it down to 150 and then make it like do 50% to minions and monsters, I'd be cool with that. Just give him faster push. So yeah, I don't think he's going to be viable right now. Not top. Support, maybe, but I doubt it. Supports or tanks are just in a really rough spot right now for supports. Okay. Rise, really big nerf. Not going to matter for solo queue. He's terrible in solo queue. This might affect him. It's going to definitely affect his wave clear in pro play. I'm not even sure if you'll see him a lot in pro play. We'll see. It's a really big deal in pro play, though. Because I think you max your E second. I think you max Q first. I'm not 100%. Rise is... I don't play him, and trying to read what his abilities do is like reading a novel. But yeah, not going to matter for solo. I mean, it does. If you're a Rise one-trick, this is going to make it much, much worse. But Rise is already garbage below Diamond most of the time, so it's not going to affect the overall metagame. But yeah, this definitely hurts Rise a lot, which won't matter for most people. Sion will matter. Some people still like praise this champion and love him. I was never a huge believer in Sion. I thought he was okay top lane if he like rushed banner. I've never been a huge believer in Sion support, but he does kind of like what I'm saying that Nautilus should do, right? Where he pushes. He is a tank that pushes. Okay. So he is a tank that pushes with his E and his Q, but the problem is he doesn't have a late game really, right? He doesn't do a ton of damage. You don't itemize damage, and he doesn't have enough CC. So Nautilus would be much better if Nautilus could take over the mantle here, be an early game push champion. Nautilus has his ult, he has his auto attacks, he has his E to slow people, he has his Q. So Nautilus is great, it has a ton of CC, really cool. Sion, not so much. So Sion is pretty much all about his E. So top lane, yeah, this will hurt him. He's going to do a lot less damage in the early game especially. The base damage is up a little bit. I don't know. I wouldn't recommend him. I think that he's not that great right now, not because of this, but just because the itemization for tanks is pretty awful, and he's going to get run over top lane by any fighter that goes Conquer, and as support, he's just going to get blown out of the water by any sort of enchanter that just pokes him or his AD carry down early. So yeah, he's not amazing. Tom Kench, I mentioned Tom earlier. I mentioned the tank problem earlier. Tom is the worst offender right now of that. And I love Tom Kench. He was my most played champion in Season 7. So it's not like I hate tanks. I love him. He's great. He's a lot of fun. He's one of my favorite tanks. I like his flavor. No pun intended there, but I like sort of his southern intellectual aspect to him. I like his kit. It's a lot of fun. It's very interesting. It's very unique. It's great. Problem is all the stuff I mentioned earlier about competitive tanks and tank items getting poached, and now his grayskin. But you don't level this up to last, so effectively this is your damage mitigation in lane. So he doesn't have a lot of steroids, he doesn't have a lot of extra armor and stuff that he gets, he doesn't have an ult like Alistar, he doesn't have Alistar sustain with his roar. There's a lot of stuff that he just doesn't have. He just has to eat harass a lot of times. This basically means, like, this is effectively damage block. So you, like, over time in lane, you're blocking 25% of damage that you get dealt. Because you get, grayskin, you get hit for 100 damage, you're going to get grayskin for 25 of that. After, you don't take damage, and then the grayskin heals you. This is basically 25% damage reduction over time in lane, right? And they're lowering that to 15%. So that's a really, really big drop. That means you're taking 10% more damage in lanes. That's effectively like giving both of your lane opponents plus 10% damage. Yikes. That's really bad. So yeah, this is going to be awful for Tom Kench. I mean, he's definitely going south of 45% win rate after this. This is one of the worst things that could happen to him. He's already bad enough in the laning phase, and this is just going to make him a lot worse. So, yeah, it's really rough. Talia is super good right now. Probably a top 5 mid laner, especially because they've nerfed a lot of the other mid laners a lot harder than they've nerfed her. Is this going to hurt her early game push? Not that much, though. You know, you're usually gated by your mana early on. You're kind of waiting on the worked ground to wear off also a lot of times. So, yeah, this is going to stop, you know, Talias that just constantly want to spam their Qs early on. But it's the same cooldown later on. It's not going to matter. It's 1 second at level 5 because this is what you max first. It's not going to matter. She is a bit more vulnerable to all ends. So she'd be vulnerable to someone like LeBlanc early on. You know, 30 health is a lot in the early stages. Overall, though, I think she's still going to be really strong. This Varus change. This is a pretty significant nerf, I think. I mean, the attack speed. I do have like a lot of like Google Docs stuff for this too. I keep forgetting to go back over to the Google Docs stuff. But he loses a lot of attack speed off of that, off of his passive. He loses 19% of his on-hit damage. This is part of what makes him really good is when he gets something like Ginsu's and Nashor's and he starts attacking really quickly, he does a lot of this on-hit damage. So taking off 5 might seem trivial, but it's not. That's a lot of damage early on. So yeah, he does additional damage equal to 10% of the target's missing HP. You know, so he's good at finishing off people with a snipe. I like the concept. I like him trying to trigger his passive and then finish people off with a skill shot. I think that's a lot better than him just sitting there auto-attacking people to death. But I already don't think he's that good in solo queue for most people. He's okay. He has a lot of utility, but for some reason, people just don't play him right. A lot of people just don't itemize him correctly. They miss their ultimates. They don't make full use of his 575 range. So he's not amazing. He's sub 50%. I think it's a nerf. At best, it's neutral. I don't think it's going to shake it up that much. He's okay. It's an interesting change, but I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. He'll be roughly the same. So he's losing the attack speed, he's losing the on-hit, but he's gaining this. So I think I personally think it's a nerf. I've heard different people say they thought it was a buff. Just depends on how you play him. It's going to give him a bit more burst damage. So if you ult somebody, attack him 3 times, and then, you know, once you have your W stacks or whatever, your blight stacks, and you Q them to do that extra damage and trigger all the blight stacks, it's going to give you more burst damage. This would be good for like lethality. Varus, which nobody gets that anymore, but for on-hit Varus, which is the most popular, the Ginsu's into Nashor build, this is definitely going to be a nerf. Vi, I don't think it's going to matter. I don't know. I'm not a jungle expert. Jungle's probably my weakest like knowledge base of roles because I just don't play it a lot, and it's its own kind of universe. But she's getting less base armor, which is going to make her a lot more dangerous in the jungle. And she is getting a little bit more regen. But this stuff will help her out with the clear. It's basically just across the board, like, at least on her passive and her Q cooldown buffs. And then excessive force is a lot less mana, so you can just spam that in the jungle probably. I mean, 14 less mana on a 40 ability. That's a lot less mana. So I think this is going to help her out with her clear. Help her get to level 6 a bit faster. Her problem is when she goes all in on somebody level 6, unless she's really far ahead, she doesn't have enough damage to outright kill them. Even if she does kill them, then she's going to die in exchange because she has no way to escape typically. And if she goes in and doesn't kill them, she doesn't have the tankiness to survive a lot of times. She's gonna die, and there's a lot of like people have a huge amount of time to react. Like when she ults somebody, yeah, they can't do a lot about that in terms of they're gonna get grabbed. It is not a suppress though, so it can be Quicksilver Sash, it can be Mikhail's, so that's worth mentioning. At least once she grabs them, then you can do that to him. So making it a suppress would be a lot better. That would help out a lot. That's a really easy quality of life buff to do, is just make it resistant to Mikhail's and Quicksilver Sash, and cleanse. But that would be a nice quality of life. But the problem is, yeah, she's just not tanky enough to survive after she engages if she doesn't kill people. And she often, unless she's really far ahead, doesn't have enough damage to kill people in one shot either. And even if she does, she's not going to escape. So that means that junglers like Kha'Zix are just going to be way better. They're very similar. They intend to pick somebody off. but Kha'Zix can kill someone in one shot, and he can usually get away when he uses his invisibility. So yeah, and then same thing, someone like Shaco can get in there and assassinate someone out of nowhere, and he can usually escape after he does that. Same thing with Eve. She has an escape mechanism after she sneaks up and kills him. So if you want to kill somebody, then these champions are just going to do it better, and they're going to be able to escape afterwards. Someone like Jax who can go in, or Warwick who can go in and disrupt the back line, try to focus key targets. They're tanky enough where they can sit there and beat on people for a while. So, like, none of these champions have an engage and CC that's as clean as Vi's, just kind of the point click. But they're just a little bit stronger in what they do. So, I don't know. I don't expect to see a lot of her, but this is definitely very nice. So, if you like Vi, that's good news for you. I don't think it's going to be enough to propel her too far in strength. Okay, the Xayah changes. Base health regen doesn't matter that much. Man, it's basically, that's per 5. So, like, she's going to have 12 less HP per minute. Not a huge deal. Now, this is going to hurt her wave clear early on, so you can't just, like, AFK push people into tower as easily as you could before. So that's going to help her out a little bit, but, you know, level 13, it does equalize. At level, 7, it's down a little bit, but not a lot. So I don't think that's going to move the needle too much. I think she's still going to be a really strong AD carry because she's a good combination of respectable damage, a lot of safety, and she's really good with, like, she does have some safety against assassins because she can ult, and she's really good against divers. So she's really good against tanks that are trying to dive and get on her as well because of her E. So I think she's still going to be super strong. Rek'Sai I don't think is going to matter. She's pretty far out of the meta right now. I mean, maybe this matters. I don't know. I'm not an Rek'Sai expert. I don't see her a lot, so I still think she's going to be probably on the weak side, but it's good quality of life stuff. This Swain thing, I don't think is going to matter that much. I mean, we'll see. He does get phase rush a lot. Maybe this will affect his phase rush, how fast he procs it, but I still expect Swain to be good. Now, one thing about this is, you know, a lot of people are saying, oh my god, it's a huge nerf. It's not really, though, if you look at it. Like, I thought it was, but 3% to 1% is a big deal. You know, when a champion has a 3,000 mana pool, you know, you're only going to be getting 30 AP instead of 60, and obviously that's a lot. Like, losing, even on a 2,000 mana pool, you're going to be losing 30 AP. So 30 times 21.75, it's going to be like you're losing 650 gold value on a 2,000 mana pool champion, and it's only going to go up. But once you have the full Seraphs, then it doesn't matter anymore. And, you know, Skara was saying, well, it's going to suck when you complete your Archangels because then, it's not going to be strong until later. It's like, yeah, but if you think about it, a lot of the core tier users also get Rod of the Ages. And so by the time you start with tier, then you complete Rod, you complete your Sorcerer Boots, and then by the time you complete Archangels after that, you're going to have that tier fully stacked. So this is not really going to matter for Karthus, Anivia, Cassiopeia, all of these tier plus Rod users, which are most tier users. This isn't going to matter. If you're someone like Talia who's trying to rush Archangels, sure, this might matter, but they can just go Ludens. You know, it's not a huge deal. So I don't really think it's going to shake up the meta. You know, I can't think, I mean, maybe I'm just blanking out, but I can't think of a champion who would want to buy tier that's going to rush Archangels that would not also mind going Ludens instead, or someone who's going to go Rod of the Ages. Because you want to go tier and then stack Rod immediately anyways. You don't rush Archangels if you're going a tier Rod person. You get Archangels after you complete Rod. So, you know, you're going to get your tier around whenever, like 6 minutes or something into the game. It's going to take you like maybe 15 or 20 minutes to stack it. So you're going to have to get your Rod of the Ages after that, which you're going to complete, I don't know, around 13 or 14 minutes. You're going to get your Sorc Boots in there somewhere. And then you're going to have to complete Archangels around, 20 to 25 minutes. By the time you get your tier 2, your Rod, and your fully completed Archangels, you're probably looking at 20 to 25 minutes, depending on how many people are dying. So, yeah, there might be however long, 3 minutes where you're slightly weaker than you were before because you have Archangels and not completed Seraphs, but whatever. In most situations, it's not going to matter that much. So yeah, I mean, the only champion I could think of that had been getting tier that doesn't also get Rod would be like Talia, like I said, but I think that she's fine going Ludens, and Ludens is probably even optimal most of the time. Yeah, I really can't. And I mean, if you're like Sona that likes to rush Archangels, maybe that's a problem, but you shouldn't be doing that anyways. You should just get tier and move on to other items. So I really don't think it's a big deal for hardly anybody that I can. Maybe Zillion? Zillion can still go tier Rod, though. I don't know. I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference because Seraphs is the same. And most people who are going to get tier are also going to get Rod, and then it's going to be fully stacked by the time you get around to finishing Archangels anyways, or it's going to be pretty close to it. Lethal Tempo is still going to be garbage. I mean, people have really tried to make this work. I mean, they did increase the numbers on here a little bit, right? Like 10%, 30% at level 18, but you're going to have so many items at level 18. You're going to be 6 items anyways. Having an extra 30% attack speed when you already have like 100 and something, it's just not going to matter that much. And no one's getting this. Even someone like the best user would probably be Kog'Maw for this because he benefits from attack speed more than anyone in the game probably. And he still doesn't get it. He still gets, a lot of pro players are still getting fleet footwork because it just gives you so much sustain in lane. It's just really hard to give up that sustain, even though they've nerfed it. It's still really good. I don't even think Master Yi would get it, right? No, Master Yi goes Conquer or press the attack. Like, nobody gets Lethal Tempo. One person here got it. Valkyrin. But yeah, it's not gonna matter. It's still really bad. I mean, it just takes too long to get warmed up to. It needs to be like, this instantly happens when you attack somebody. Or maybe they could do it like Conquer, where if you're in combat for a couple of seconds, like where you could trigger it off of minions or something, where you're in combat for a couple of seconds, and then when you auto attack an enemy champion, then you get this buff. So that way you could trigger it instantly if you've been laning. And then I think it should refresh, so as long as you stay in combat, then you get to keep the attack speed. I think that would probably make it worth it, but as it stands, outclassed. Trinkets, this is going to be really good for champions that want really strong bush control and can take advantage of that early on. So Zyra is the huge beneficiary of this. You can use your plants for extra vision early on, so you're not going to miss the wards as much as some other champions. And if you have full bush control, that's really, really strong with her. Because, if anytime you land an E on somebody, they're probably dead. Someone like Blitzcrank would also love this early on. So there would be some supports that could use this. The biggest beneficiary, obviously, is going to be junglers, especially early junglers. You don't need the wards as much as a jungle. They're nice, but if you're like a Kha'Zix or Lee Sin's still obviously going to want the wards, but maybe an Eve. Like, just anyone that has some early game aggression that can use this sweeper is going to be a really, really big deal. So I'm not entirely sure how much this is going to change the overall meta, if it's going to make early game champions like obscenely stronger. But another thing about Xayah is this will allow you, if you want to stack eyeball collection earlier. And I haven't historically really liked eyeball collection, but this will make it much more viable because you can start getting those stacks really early on, right? So now you could go something like eyeball collection and Genius Hunter if you wanted to in some lanes. And that's a build it's a whole other video where I've talked about that with Zyra, where you can go something like Twin Shadows fairly early, and that helps smooth out some of her curve. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be like an insanely massive deal, but it's certainly good for early game champs, especially ones that want bush control in the bot lane, and then for early game junglers as well. I don't think this is going to matter that much for solo queue. I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to matter. I didn't look at these. I don't think this is a huge deal. I'm pretty sure this is just like visual effects on a lot of this stuff. Sometimes they sneak in some important things down here, but yeah, I don't think any of this is really going to matter. Oh, cannon minions now correctly scale past 87 gold. It's okay. It's not going to change the way you play the game. You're just going to get a little bit more gold if you last hit those cannon minions. Or you can get more tilted when you watch your 80 carry miss them. Okay. Alright, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Didn't quite make the cut for an hour, but I did spend a long time researching that Janna thing, and I think I uncovered, a secret or just a big misprint that a lot of people who aren't support mains are probably not going to notice in those patch notes. If that really is a nerf to did I say Zyra? I meant Janna. So, like, Janna's W, that's some pretty big breaking news, but we'll see. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.